things that we really didn't know. So we had some really great vendors. So we called in one of our vendors and we said, help us understand this, help us develop some thinking. So what I have to show you today is basically the culmination of what we've been doing for the last 4 years. Each year we go out, we talk to consumers, we ask them more questions around it. And what I really have is, and I'm not a research company at this point, we're a creative company, a digital agency, but what we're trying to do is sort of share our creative brief on how we talk to millennials, and hopefully that kind of spurs some thinking and gets you guys going for the day. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. Let me make sure on here. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to look at a little bit, just to give you a little bit of background, is sort of where millennials are in the universe in terms of purchasing power, where they are in terms of size. As we continue to look at this, millennials are starting to really come into the workforce at a big number. Their purchasing power is certainly not where boomers are. They're not even close. But their size is there, which means it's going to be coming and it's going to be happening pretty quickly. That's telling us a whole lot about what's happening with millennial thinking, how they're progressing into the marketplace. Let's see if I can get this to react. Just getting a little bit of getting ahead of itself. Okay, so one of the things that we look at is where millennials are in the workforce. And at this point, they're about a third of the workforce. So when we first started doing this, we started this when 4 years ago we were looking at 13 to 33, then next year 14 to 34. Now we're at 16 to 36. We're talking to these consumers. These are now our coworkers. This is not like, oh, these are the kids that we just brought in. This is our coworkers. This is a third of the workforce. This is what we're dealing with. And their attitude and how they work is really a part of this economy. And what's happening a lot is they're feeling pretty good about who they are, because there's a lot of jobs coming in. As boomers are not quite out or leaving the marketplace, millennials are not quite in. So we still have a group of millennials in this 16 to 21-year-old group that is not in the workforce. We have a little bit of a labor shortage, and that's sort of contributing to the attitude that we have and some of the things that are going on with millennials in the workforce right now. But this is definitely something we need to be prepared for. So one of the things that we've been kind of looking at is how they get there. So I was at a recruitment fair at University of Missouri Journalism School. There was 350 students, 43 employers last week. And there was a group of students that got up and they were explaining to us their mindset. And they said, if you don't give us a quarterly review every 90 days, we're going to find someone else who will. And everyone was shocked. There was 43 companies in this big banquet. We're all looking at each other going, you're kidding me, right? And the more that sunk in, we're saying, well, you know what? This seems to be what this cohort expects. We're going to have to start thinking like them. So I was doing some research, and everything that I'm going to share with you today, we just got back this month. So a lot of the research that I'm going to take you through, I just got back. So last Wednesday, I thought, you know what, let me just find out. Let me ask a subsegment of millennials that are over 21, that make over 30 grand a year, if they would leave a job that sounded better, and if they were happy in their job, their current job, they were fit in the culture, would you leave to go to a new job for $1,000 a year raise? And this is what happened. 36% said, yes, I'll leave. Okay, so just so we know, that's 50 cents an hour pre-tax. And what does that tell us, right? That this is about a cohort that believes that they can do a lot of things. And a lot of we obviously have a huge millennial population in our agency, and no one was as shocked as we were to say, really 50 cents an hour and we lose somebody? So pool tables and ping pong tables and $1,000 sounds good. And then after that, the way that we did the research was if you said yes, you were out. If you said no, you kept going, 5,000 and then 10,000. So what you can see is by the time we got to 10,000, we basically lost everybody. Or another way to look at it is to say, there's only 20 people out of the subset of 250 that were willing to stick around for less than, for $10,000. So that tells us a lot about who they are, where their mindset is, but a lot about their confidence. So as we start getting into research, I'll start talking about how we did it. But does anybody shocked by this? Would you guys think that seems unusual that they would do that? No? All right, let me kind of keep going. So just a couple of other sort of precepts before we dig into the research. One of the things that we think about when we think about where marketing came from was that everything sort of started with this whole military thinking. We were always working in this concept of sort of media equals troops, equals power, and sort of the way that media was delivered and the way that media was taught. These guys, Reese and Trout, you guys know the book Positioning the Battle for the Mind. It was supposed to be one of the greatest books ever written in marketing. They came back in the late 80s and they did this book, and every single part of it was written by a military planner and Reese and Trout. And everything in there was military strategy. That's where all of the verbiage and all the concepts of how a lot of people in the C-suite were taught was, if you have the most media, you have the most troops. You have the most troops, you win. Don't have a big media budget, you do guerrilla marketing. All that concept, strategy, execution, all those words, media blitz, those all kind of came from the military. But again, that is now being curated by this consumer, and we're realizing that's not working. Because in a sense, those are basically weapons of mass persuasion, right? We're just throwing information out there, seeing if it's going to work. And as we get through this presentation, we'll come back around to that and we'll say, well, where does that leave us? So we started off, and each year what we've done is we talk to 1,000 consumers, and we start off the questionnaire by giving them 3 empty boxes and say, name your 3 favorite brands unaided. Completely there's nothing in there that says even what a brand is. So we've gotten all kinds of different answers, but as we've gone through this, we learn from it. So we start off with this sort of base question. Now we have 4 years of research to compare it to that I'm going to take you through. Once we get those answers, we start asking questions about those answers specifically. So just a couple of things that we've begun to see in terms of attributes and how they think. And this is kind of sort of the setup question. How do you describe yourself? They're given 36 attributes on how they describe themselves. The first 6 kind of stayed the same for the last 2 or 3 years. This year I saw something new happen and I wanted to be able to share it with you. So this positive attitude, I'm confident, I'm self-directed, I love my device, I'm a free spirit, all that's been in there. And read a lot. We were like, okay, what are they reading? Well, obviously we figured out they were reading their phones, but after that, we started seeing these other words that we hadn't seen before. Fiscally responsible, globally aware, health conscious. This is all new news. And I think what's happening is now we have 36-year-old millennials. We're starting to see a little bit difference, a little bit more sobering in terms of how they think. They still feel really confident because, again, remember, the marketplace is on their side from the job situation and from their purchasing power. So we asked them what they're doing all day and how they're doing it. And this stuff is less than a week old. 74% said they spend 1 to 4 hours a day reading social media. 45% said they spend 1 to 4 hours posting. And then 76% said they're watching TV, but only I think it's like 32% is live TV. Everything else is recorded. So that tells us a little bit about what we're going to do with it. And that was one of the questions we really wanted to find out. We know that they love to be entertained and they're watching a lot of shows. Where does TV fit in that world? And if a lot of it is DVR'd, you may not be getting that kind of reach. One of the things that we wanted to find out was how often they're checking their phone. So, I mean, how many people here post regularly on social media? And when you post, is there anybody that takes something down after you've posted it? You've done that? Because? Any reasons why? Yes? Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Nobody liked you? Yeah, that joke wasn't funny. Anybody else? Yeah. So one of the things that we start to see is that we're all marketing ourselves. Everyone's a brand marketer, and we're actually marketers marketing the marketers, and so we're starting to feel that ourselves. But one of the things that we look at, and we actually see, I think the number for adults is even higher for people that are in the workplace. They're checking their phone even more than 43 times a day. I would say that you guys probably are. We see numbers that get into 100, but this number actually really correlated with some other research that we saw. Gary Vaynerchuk had almost the same number in some stuff he just published. So 43 times a day they're checking their phone. and 11 pieces of content a day. So that's pretty significant. I mean, that's a lot of content that we're up against that they feel is good and their friends are going to see. And that's just something to keep in mind. So all that's really great, and we can feel great about ourselves and the confidence is there, but nothing matters until you have proof. And this is just the conundrum of this generation, and it's something that's been created through this whole social thing. This is actually a street photo that the city in Spain basically took a picture of this guy because it was against the law to run with the bulls there. And it was a $5,000 fine. So this was a photo that was actually published in a wanted ad because they wanted to find this guy so they could prosecute him. And they said, don't take a picture when you run with the bulls. And he did it anyway, and here he is. And this has been going on. There's been people doing that and all kinds of things. But what it really is about is it doesn't matter until I tell you about it. And it's just one of the things that we need to be really aware of. So here's what happened. We looked at 1,000 consumers. We've now gotten 12,000 answers. So every year we get answers to say, who are your favorite brands? And we sort of begin to bracket those down. So we got down to the top 50 over 4 years. And the interesting way that we've been looking at this is, okay, each year we go out and we say, who's new to the list? What can we learn from it? And then who's been there the longest? And what are these brands doing to sort of create a, this following, this affinity? What are they doing right? And how can we learn from it? And who isn't on the list? So the ones in the red there were there for 4 years. And so we've done this 4 years in a row, 12,000 answers. They're in my top 50 4 years in a row. And I could look at those and say, well, those are all really well-known names. You got a name like Target. We actually we went out like the week after the credit card thing with Target, and they still killed it on every level. And it's because they represent a lot of good value. They represent style to this cohort. There's a lot there. Macy's has done a tremendous job with predictive analytics. They've done all kinds of things. But then you get into 3 years running, and I talked to HP, and they did some killer stuff where they did some documentaries where they were taking video of this surfer that had this bendable surfboard that connected to sort of what their product looked like. And I begin to see what's happening. But one of the things that we really start to see is retailers do really well. And I think that they do really well for a lot of reasons. But one of them, I think, is because there's like a dopamine hit. When you get together with someone you haven't seen, you have this sort of feeling of, oh, wow, it's really great to see you. I'm going to have this sort of rush. We're going to talk about things. I think that works the same way when you're doing it digitally. And I think that when you get to a retail store, that can happen. You can have this good feeling when you go to the store. You're going to make me look better. You're going to make me feel good. I sent the interns out to all the retailers over the summer, and I said, just come back and tell me what happens. So the interns come back, I said, what happened? They said, well, they told me how much they liked my shirt. Well, okay, well, that's just good retailing, but that's an opportunity to connect. And so retailers sort of dominate this list, and you'll see as we get further into it that it seems to make the most sense. So here's 3 years and then or 2 years and 1 year left. And so this is where I think it really gets interesting, because now I start dissecting. So this year we just went out, we did 1,000 consumers in January. I only had 8 new names to put on this list. So each time this comes in and we start working backwards, what did these people do? How is this all working? And so as we look at this research, and what we're starting to break down is all these brands have a lot going on. I couldn't tell you that there's any one given thing. I've seen some really great case histories that I love to talk about, and I'll mention a few of them. But I think the overall thought is they really work their communities hard. They have ways for consumers to participate in their brand. That's what's really going on. And then there's some people that have just done something that has just sort of broken through. And so it just becomes kind of interesting. Ralph Lauren has done a whole lot of stuff with this denim brand. They've sort of created the brand for millennials. They found ways to connect with them. They did a music video to launch the brand with this DJ Avicii. They partnered with Macy's. Whole Foods has done a lot of interesting things where they have this local marketing thing. They opened up a store in a little town called Carbondale, Colorado. And on a $2,500 budget, the local person shot a video of people talking about why they why they wanted a Whole Foods, why they deserved a Whole Foods. So they're up against the mountains, they got their cowboy outfits on. They're like, we're the healthiest people in the world, we deserve a Whole Foods. They shot this video, they put it out there on their own posts, in their Facebook posts. These people repopulated it. They never had to spend another nickel on the whole concept. It completely made sense for everyone. And when they got the Whole Foods, they thought they won the lottery. And that was on a really small budget, but they played back to them. You know, and I looked at all kinds of different retailers. Has anyone ever heard of Valve? You guys know what Valve is? What is Valve? Right. You ever seen a Valve ad? Okay. 12,000 opportunities to get on this list. I've got no Budweiser, I've got no Miller. If I put all of AB and Bud Light together, and Budweiser and AB together, as a company, I could maybe get them to like number 80 on my list. But Valve is on there because they're doing this digital gifting thing. So if you know about Valve, you know what Bethesda is. Another digital gaming company. No advertising money at all, favorite brand. So that begins to tell us something here about what these brands are doing. And you know, I think that as we work backwards and we look at almost all these brands have pretty vibrant lists of activities going on. They have a pretty healthy, you know, consumer base, but they're coming up with ideas to let people play with them and to get into their space. You know, as I've been doing this around the country, I presented Colgate one year, and they were on my list the first year, and I had somebody jump up and go, you know what, I worked there, and you're out of your mind. And we went back and looked at it, and Colgate had done this program called Tweet a Smile. All you had to do was take a picture of yourself smiling, and they were going to give money to a charity in a foreign country, et cetera. And that resonated because they were already taking pictures of themselves smiling. So little things can happen, but I think it's more of just having the complete picture. So this is all new research that we just got back. We wanted to know, okay, how do you define your brand status? So question, who are your favorite brands? 1, 2, and 3. Tell us what the status that you have with that brand is. I own the brand, I purchase the brand, I recommend it, I buy it online, I talk about it, I'm loyal, I follow them on social media. It helps me build my status. You know, I'm friends with the brand. So all those things begin to sort of tell us a little bit about where they play. We were really trying to lead them this time to say, are you your own marketer? Are you your own brand? Does this brand help you market yourself? And they wanted nothing to do with those questions. We really started getting some turnoffs when we started really probing deeper. So we had to sort of change our line of questioning. But this begins to tell us something about where this consumer lives and where they are. But it also validates that they are purchasing the brands. They say they do own them. So next question was, we obviously had to do a smartphone survey. Everything is on the phone. But we wanted to know how they interact with these brands on their phone. This is the biggest question we have is, look, it's happening on social. How are you interacting? So this is kind of what came back to us in order. So it's Facebook, it's websites, it's Instagram, it's email, YouTube, Twitter. So I want to talk a little bit about email. One of the things that we did as we went through this over the last couple of years was we did some qualitative just to make sure we were on the right track. And we asked consumers, if you're willing to give a brand your email, walk across the room. So all of them walked across the room, and we said, well, why'd you do that? And they said, well, I can always opt out. And it's one of the things that we don't think about is what the power can be of having that sort of two-way communication with that consumer, as long as you're talking about something that's relevant to them. So you see texting, Google+, Facebook Messenger, Pinterest, Snapchat shows up, LinkedIn shows up, and then so it's basically 75% are doing something with their smartphone with the brand. And so that becomes sort of an interesting concept, and I think these numbers sort of make a little bit of sense. So another question that this is all just fresh data that we just asked again. We've asked this 2 or 3 different times over the years. How do you discover new brands? And so one of the things that we really feel like that happens more than anything is it's all word of mouth. It's from what people are saying. I trust my friends. So any kind of Facebook post, shared posts makes a whole lot of sense. You know, online, word of mouth. If there's somebody else talking about it, I believe that too. So the top 3 ways that they're connecting or what other people are saying. So we're looking at this from an advertiser perspective. We have to also know these people are listening to their friends pretty severely. And then written reviews, see and touch, there's your in-store experience. Ultimately they believe a lot. They believe, we used to think of news as being something that was sacrosanct to the New York Times. The way that BuzzFeed has changed things, the genesis of David Letterman's top 10 list and America's Funniest Home Videos are probably 90% of how we communicate today. And that's, the media has actually picked up on that. So believing people, believing what they see is all happening. Then Facebook ads show up, TV ads show up. So it becomes an interesting way of thinking that as people are learning from their friends, we need to be part of that. So this is another new question that we just asked. What does it take for you to make a purchase? Where does the purchase intent come from? And what you're going to see is the top three, or top two, are word of mouth, family and friends, word of mouth from online posts. I'm checking to see what people are saying. That is really coming in as the purchase intent thing. Then product review, which is kind of falling into the same zone. Posts featuring brands, then blogs, then the company's posts, brand emails, then Facebook ads and news stories. So you can see that we're really starting to get heavy into, they're telling us that what they hear from other people is really important to them. Kind of keep going here. Who do you live with? So basically 90% live with somebody. So they're either already in a marital status, they're living with a significant other, they're with their parents, they're with roommates, but very few live alone. This cohort is not alone. They are always doing something with other people. That kind of fits with this word of mouth, what do my friends say, all that stuff seems to fit together. But we only found, we've asked this question, we actually did this question twice. We did it about 3 years ago, and it was about 85% 3 years ago. Now it's at 90%. So the net on this is that when you're talking to one, you're talking to many. So a lot of times when you're thinking about doing programming, think about doing sort of group programming. That kind of makes a little bit of sense. So one of the things that we did as we got into this and we brought our researchers in, we said, let's make sure we're on the right track, and we decided to do some qualitative. So we took these consumers into a room and we said, whiteboard, what characteristics does a brand need to have for you to adopt them? And we took that information back and we went back out to quantitative to see how we could rank it. So what we came back was high quality, would recommend, fits my personality, socially responsible, shares my interests, and says important things. We've checked this data 2 or 3 times. It seems to come back in this ranking. Feeling that you're high quality, it says something about you. I would recommend, fits my personality. This is about me. How is your brand helping me? So our net on our first year or two of research was, holy cow, they're not consuming advertising. They're participating in brands, and we need to find more ways to create brand participation. That seems to be where this is netting out. So we continue to sort of layer and build on the line of questioning. One of the things that we started to try to understand was what categories of products have the most engagement. And we work a lot in the spirits category and the beer category, and we wanted to understand from our own client perspective how this would work. So we started looking at categories. And what we saw was that entertainment and apparel had the highest levels of engagement. And so it's like, well, wait a minute, what does that tell us? It also told us that there was different media types by category. Another way of looking at this was, what's the best way in each category to connect? But why is it that apparel and entertainment are the highest levels? And we started to try to understand that. Well, started thinking about apparel. I'm helping them look good. I'm doing things for them. I've told them that there's shoes on sale. I've given them information. And entertainment is almost everything. If you think about that, I did a panel at University of San Francisco last year, and there was a student that stood up and said, if you don't entertain me by 9 in the morning, I have no interest in being part of your brand. And this whole concept of entertainment becomes part of who they are, and we're going to share more of that as we go forward here. And by the way, if there's any opportunity later, I have the specifics by media type, by category. I just don't want to try to do too much this morning. So as we started connecting the dots, I started finding like different stories that as I talked to different marketers, and I wanted to understand, particularly from some of these people that were only on the list 1 or 2 times, give me a good sense of what you did to get there. So I talked to specific marketing companies, and I talked to the VP Marketing of Sprint. I said, what do you think you did to get on the list? He said, look, we do this family plan, we're selling iPhones, we basically have this, we have what they need at a reasonable price. I told you about Colgate. Honda's basically become like a entertainment brand. They did all kinds of sort of gaming. They did a day for night video series. That seemed to make sense. Oreo just continues to do more programming. They've got credit for a lot of things, but the thing that Oreo does is they sort of stopped talking about themselves as a brand and started talking to themselves as sort of this wonder-filled concept. It's just about the emotion of wonder-filled, and they bring that to life through videos. If you go to Oreo.com, you can see a tremendous amount of work that they've done there. Wendy's does this thing where they let consumers participate in their brand. Send us in a hashtag, and we'll put you into a commercial. If you guys have seen any of the Wendy's stuff, they were voted best millennial fast food brand. You can participate in their brand. Basically, they're saying, we're advertising, but you're helping us do it, and it breaks those walls down. I told you about Ralph Lauren and Vans. I think we have somebody from Vans here. Vans continues to do some cool stuff. They do the documentary with their fans. They also have other participatory things that they're doing with their consumers, and that seems to work pretty well. Also, I want to mention that we've been tracking these case histories. I'm going to have about 3,000 of these. I've got 2,900 on our site at this point, but we've been tracking these case histories since 2008. And so I have these little short case histories on our site. If you ever want to check on those, look at our site, Moose Tracker, and you can actually even search it if you want to see what's on there. So we started looking at this thing and said, okay, let's step back from this. What are we learning now? What we came back was make me look good, make me feel good, keep me entertained. Those 3 things together seem to make the most sense for us. If we think about that, we can pretty much say if we do all those 3, any one of those 3, we're probably going to connect with millennials. And one of the things that we do when we're doing creative briefing is we may split up into 3 groups and look at it as each group do different concept. We've tested this idea. We've asked consumers about these things. These 3 seem to work. So one of the things that's sort of a question to us, and we do a lot of social, is what does it take to allow a brand into my social feed? Why do I care about a brand being in my social feed? So we took a lot of the precepts that we had already thought about, and then we ranked those, and we asked consumers, and we did this over a couple of years. So this is several thousand consumer answers. But again, high quality shows up number 1. Fits my personality, makes me feel good. Again, we just took our own lines, fed them back, and wanted to see how they ranked. I own that brand. It's entertaining and fun. It's socially responsible. Makes me look good. I have the same interests. I recommend it over others, and it has important things to say. So as we start thinking about what it takes to be in the social feed, being relevant becomes obviously the most important thing. So one of the things that we wanted to know as we've looked at this, and we look at two-way, and we think, okay, we want to talk to consumers, we want consumers to give us information back. We asked the question, in the pull-down menu, your favorite brand, 1, 2, 3, have you ever had a meaningful two-way interaction with that company? Okay, so basically we had about 15-16% said yes. So that means we had 160 verbatims to look at out of 1,000. And so we started getting these verbatims back. Tell us what that meaningful interaction was. Sometimes it was as simple as they retweeted me. I think they're funny. One guy said, they give me a shout out every now and then. Basically, they know that I'm a brand and they're recognizing me. And there's another guy's driving down the street and he sees that Getting Jiggy With It is playing on his car radio while he's driving, takes a picture of it, tweets out, Getting Jiggy With It, me and Sirius, whatever, hashtag Sirius, Sirius picks it up, they retweet him, he and Sirius are now best friends. That whole thing probably took about 10 seconds. But that's how much it takes to get that consumer into that loyalty category. And so two-way can be pretty much anything works. We asked them how important is social to your day, 28%. And it seems like the right number when we walk around our office and we see what people are doing. It seems like that. I'm sure you see the same thing in your office. I've communicated my favorite brand 8%. I find it hard to filter all the messages I get at 28. I want to interact with my favorite brand 10% of the time. And so this is one of the things that we really work with our clients to try to understand is think about that. We want our agents, our clients want the agencies to get this to be in that feed 100% of the time. We ask them your favorite brand, how often you want to see them in your feed? They say 10%, which means we got a lot of work to do to get there. It doesn't mean we can't do better than that. It just means that's where they expect it to be. 54% said they'll remove a post if they see too much stuff. And that seems about right. If there's too many things going on, if we're feeding too often, we could get there. So another thing we wanted to see is we found this study by this scientist called Robert Plechnik at Google, and this guy did this study of emotions, and he categorized every possible emotion that there was, and that consumers can have, and that people can have. And so we took that list and we gave it to millennials, and we've done this twice now, and we said, tell us what emotion your favorite brand has caused you to have in the last 30 days. And so this is kind of what it looked like. There it is. Joy, trust, and anticipation. So we look at joy, trust, and anticipation, and the same numbers, pretty much the same three, the same ranking. We did this over the 4-year period, so I've done it twice now. So 2,000 consumers told us this. My number 1, 2, and 3 brand, all in the mid-70s for joy, then trust, and then anticipation. So you can be the joy brand. That can mean a whole lot. You can be the trust brand. You know, I can count on this brand. Anticipation. You're the brand that's going to tell me what's coming. And then we get the surprise. So we get surprise and delight from the joy piece, and it seems to make sense. And one of the things that we found was you could relate to a brand through anger and rage. There's some numbers there. Not a lot, but there's some numbers there. Am I not looking? So now we get into this whole concept of what do we really want to do when we want to connect? Where do we want to be? How do we want to look at this? So I think we got it. There we are. So the first thing that we believe is that you have to have permission. You can't just come right at people. You have to have an idea. And that could be a creative idea, a digital idea, experiential idea, but there has to be something there. And one of the reasons that we wanted to sort of build this ladder is, as we've run into sort of ad tech people over the last few years, a lot of people think, well, I'll just come up with a solution. I'll just deliver my message. I'll circumvent getting an idea, and I'll just come right at this consumer. And we really think you have to have an idea. And then from there, you get to the connection platform. And we've seen really good connection platforms. I don't think you should solve the connection platform until you have the room filled with ideas. And if you have the right connection platform, then it seems to make sense. So if the app is the right connection platform, if it's the functionality that makes sense, then look at an app. If it's social that makes the most sense, look there. But have the connection platform fulfill the idea. And then from there, two-way participation is like, the first two are basically high school. Nothing matters until we get to two-way, because we haven't really got that consumer on our team. And that's the way that we look at building the relationship. So I saw a presentation at 1871 in Chicago, which is their 300 company think tank, our startup tank there. And the presentation basically said, attention is the new currency. And I want to give them credit for that idea. But as we look at it, some of the things that we found around it are, first of all, we've lost 4 seconds in an attention span since 2000. So we have 8 seconds of attention span. And we see that a lot. We see that in how people recommend that we look at video now. The first 5 seconds you need to type, you need something right there. It's got to be there. But as the more we look at attention, the next thing that we see is there's 2 ways to look at attention. You can get it or you can give it, right? If it's currency, let's trade. Let's come up with a way that we can help this consumer out. We can give you attention or we can do something to get attention. But we don't have to just do one way. We can make that 2-way as well. And I think that's a good way to think about attention. So this is another thing that happens to us all the time. What do you want to see in your social feed? And we ask this question fun and interesting versus news and information. And 6-1. That shouldn't surprise anyone, but what we see is a client PR department will come in and say, drop this news release in the social feed. You guys know what I'm saying? I saw this with a couple of our clients in the last year where they'll just come in and they'll go, no, the social feed is a distribution point, and this is an important news release for our company. Stick it in the social feed. And it doesn't belong there. You put it on the website, do something else, make it entertaining if you're going to mention it, but it should have nothing to do with what happens, because news is not what they want. They want to be entertained, and they want it to be fun. So video. Video will account for 69% of all internet traffic, this is according to Cisco, by next year. Video becomes the currency. It's the way that people like to hear stories. It's bedtime stories told over and over again. Go back one. So how do we think about this then? Now we start thinking about what do we do with this information. And our concept is we kind of have to play with consumers. We've got to have fun with them. We've got to challenge them. We've got to live in their zone. And part of it is if you think about where they are from how they feel about themselves, I think they're always up for a challenge. They want us to say, hey, we want to take you on, because they feel pretty good about themselves. Have fun with them. Don't make it into something that they believe they're being marketed to. Another thing we saw is that 30% of social can get shared if they like it. We said, if you like what a brand is saying, will you share it in your social feed? 30% said yes. So if we can create video, and you guys can create video that people want to share, we're well above the 10% of what they said they wanted to see. And sharing is like, to me, this is like almost the reason why everything works. And this is new data that we picked up from a company called Social Bakers. If you have a paid Facebook post and someone comments on it, 72% of their feed sees it. But if you have a Facebook post and they share it, almost their entire feed will see it. That's why when Sarah Palin and when Tina Fey did Sarah Palin 2 weeks ago, you couldn't have gone to a water cooler if somebody hadn't already seen the video. It gets populated. When you share something, to me this is almost like how the internet works. If we know we get almost 100% share through video, through a paid Facebook buy, come up with good stuff to get shared. Now let's say it's organic. Well, now we're only dealing with 3% of what we had at best, but we still have almost a 90% or 95% of that audience's group. So think about that from a delivery standpoint. So to us, this becomes a really interesting way of thinking about it. We've got to get to shareable content. So I want to show you a couple of examples quickly of how we think about shareable content, and I want to come back around to some of the other things that we've learned from it. This is a series of social feeds that we did, social videos for Sapporo. Never once do we talk about the product, the brand, the wheat, anything. We just have fun with consumers. basically we're doing things that their friends would do, right? We're being their friend. And one of the things that we're seeing is that we started to break this down as we got some new research back last week. We said, well, there's almost 3 ways of looking at it. You have seeing, believing, and acting. We can post stuff, we can put videos out, we can do email, we can make them believe by giving them information, how-to, and stories, and then we can get them to act by liking, sharing, and playing. So we can break it down from that perspective as well. One of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to find out what was important to consumers. So we said I tried to see how many consumers would send me their favorite posts. And we offered them $5 to send us their favorite Instagram posts. And we got quite a few back. And we started trying to say, well, what does this tell us about this consumer? We want to understand because we're basically up against them to get our content published, right? And what we saw was these sort of moments. They seem to send back their favorite moments. And I don't know exactly what this means. Maybe it's just the nature of Instagram, but they definitely felt like there was things that they had done that were important enough that they could call it their favorite moment. One was a wedding, one was a picture of a birth announcement that they did in a clever way. Somebody was at the Eiffel Tower. So those are all just things that they thought were killer moments. This is another idea that we executed for Sapporo. We call it the Giferator. We let consumers download this software to make a gift to send us back to win a trip to Japan. It was a karaoke contest. For a $5,000 Facebook buy, we got 2,000 pieces of reusable content. That tells us that if we give this consumer something to interact with us, to co-create with us, they're going to play with us. And we had some great stuff. There was one guy that did a video of himself jumping in the swimming pool with a can of Sapporo, then reversed the video, and it was him coming out of the swimming pool. And you know, I would have loved to give him, it was a random drawing, but as far as I was concerned, that guy deserved to win. But that was kind of what we saw there. Another thing that we just completed that's just in test right now is for the company Credit Karma, they wanted consumers to have an opportunity to think about what does their future lead. So we created a concept that allowed them to sort of make a video of their future, and they do that by playing a little game. They go online, you can try it at Games of Karma, you pick it out. It's kind of like the MASH game, except for it's karma. It's your kids, your assets, your realty, your marriage, and your auto. What is that going to look like? And this is kind of what happens. There's about 28,000 different videos that can happen based on your suggestions, and it spits back this video.
It's the potential future you. In the future, you don't have any kids, but you do adopt a highway. So there's that. You drive a stretch limousine. Your #1 client, international pop superstar. You live in a huge mansion, and for some reason, the mortgage is pretty reasonable. You married your high school sweetheart at the same place you got engaged, Midfield. Lucky you. And your assets include naming rights to that star up there. Nope, wait, over a little. Now, yeah, that one right there. And there you have it, a glimpse into your potential future.
So all the consumer had to do was upload their photo, they got some shareable content, they could put it out there. I have 2 more slides for you guys, and then I'm going to let you get to your meetings. This kind of leads us to sort of how we think about where do we put all this stuff? Where do we put all this information? So we started thinking about the funnel for millennial purchase. What does it look like? If you think about a typical purchase funnel, you've got awareness, consideration, conversion, and then loyalty. If you think about traditional, and you think about where we started from when we started talking today, we started talking about weapons of mass persuasion. That's that left side. We're dropping information to consumers. They didn't ask for it. It's coming at them. Then we get into sort of consideration. That's where we start finding all these different products that are out there that allow us to get the consumer to read something, to maybe get to the website. We know they're interested. We know they're a potential buyer. We're tracking them. We're looking for them. We're retargeting. You may have some paid digital, some paid social. We're finding them. We're trying to get there. But we believe that social becomes sort of the fence to consumer participation. They can find out about us, but then they can participate with us in social. So once they say, I'm in, I'm doing stuff with you, what does that look like? Well, now they can play a game with us like we just showed you. They can do a contest. They can get to the website where we can maybe get some functionality that makes sense for them. They can participate in emails. They can download our app. They would sign up for push notifications. Now that we're in that conversion process, well, we think that loyalty doesn't happen until we start getting into this whole co-creation concept. We want to do things with them because there's no way that they're going to say, hey, that's an advertiser, if they're feeling like they're doing something with us and they're creating with us. That's the feeling that we want to get to. Once we get to e-com, obviously they're already playing with us, they gave us their credit card, we're doing stuff together. Email, again, can be incredibly personalized, and you can do a whole lot with it. Phone calls, being in store, retail ambassadors, all that makes sense. This is how we sort of look at the funnel. We look at this right side as being more genuine in terms of where you can get to with this consumer. And then finally, when we think about where we want to be, and we've talked about weapons of mass persuasion, we talked about the targeting that we were all taught in school. Now I think what we're talking about is the target's audience. Who are their audience and how do we get there? How do we get to that 98% of their audience? And what kind of programming do we have to do to feel like that? And that's the bulk of what we've been doing. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to talk about it.
I noticed on your slides that were early on about the brands that were popping up. On the last 2 years, you had some luxury brands that started popping up, BMW, and then I was interested to see Chanel.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how Chanel got the millennials involved?
Yeah, they made it one time. And I've had that question before. I think it was an aspirational ask. I think they might have been doing some things to get there. I have not seen anything specifically that gets them there. I don't know that it's in their purchase consideration, but they did make it one time, as well as BMW. And I looked at that, and I noticed that they have pretty significant social audiences. I mean, we're talking 20 million people, and I think that they just managed to push themselves out there to get enough activity going.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Anybody else? Yes.
Great presentation, thanks. Can you talk a little bit about within sports, so many of these athletes are coming out now where they have their own personal brands. Did you guys test against LeBron James, Michael Jordan, some of those where they actually still fall within sort of brand relevancy?
Well, you know what? The way that we did it was we did not lead the witness. We basically gave them these 3 empty boxes, and we asked them what a brand was. I mean, we didn't tell them what a brand was. We said, give us your favorite brand. We didn't tell them what a brand was. So when we first started, we started getting things that weren't even brands. Like they'd say iPhone instead of Apple. They'd say iPad. So I don't know that they look at those as brands. I think they look at those as their friends. I think we just have to track and see how significant those populations are and how much interaction is happening. Yes?
You showed Facebook still being the leading platform for millennials. I've seen other research where Instagram and Snapchat and others are outpacing. Any insights there where you have Facebook still as the leader?
Well, actually, it came down. It definitely came down over the last few years. But in terms of sheer population, it's still there. In terms of their robust targeting, it's still there. And it seems to be that the most efficient way to gather. One thing I could say is that I don't think as advertisers we can look at it. I mean, it's one of the things we look at is the right content for the right social channel. One of the things that we saw was last year in Adweek, and I don't know why Adweek just publishes this stuff without thinking about it, but they announced that Brown-Forman, Bacardi had both bought, and Brown-Forman, Bacardi, and Miller had all bought 30-second ads on Snapchat. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? They took the left side and they tried to drop it into the right side. It doesn't make any sense. That's a participatory medium. Give them something they can participate with. So I think in the context of your question, it's just what's appropriate for the right audience and where it's at, and I think it's just a sheer numbers game at this point. Anybody else? Yes.
Social media question again. What are some of the successful brand teams and agency teams look like in terms of number of people on the agency and the client side, focus areas, skill set, and media budgets as those are evolving quickly?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things that we talk a little bit about is the client marketing platform of the future, and having clients that have someone inside who knows the analytics and can understand what they're purchasing. I think that's becoming something that we need to get to. We're not quite there yet. We still have a lot of clients that want to sort of run their own social, but the challenge of making social interesting, I think, is going to get harder. So I think that what we like to see is clients that really want to understand the analytics and understand what's behind it all, and it makes everyone's job easier. But I'm not seeing anything perfect at this point. Yeah. Well, I think it's about relevancy. I think if you have the right idea that fits into their lifestyle, I don't know that you can have that formula. I think it's a matter of if you've got a concept that can be articulated and articulated easily and they want to participate in it, switch it up. Don't do the same thing all the time. But I do think you should be aware how much you are doing, but as long as you're relevant and they're following you, I think it makes sense. You know, one of the things that we're testing right now with the way that we're doing the Credit Karma thing is we're looking based on their current population, how many people are responding, how many people are reposting, and then we're deciding what to do with it once we get it going. That's good? Well, have a great day. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Norty. That was a fabulous way to start our first day. So if everyone, not just anyone, if everyone will take out your schedule and just take a look at the first session there, we're going to begin momentarily with our first session starting at 8:55. So I'm sorry, at 8:50. So you have a couple minutes to grab a coffee, to chat, and if you need anything, please let the Millennium Alliance staff know. Thanks.